Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tai Chi Notebook podcast. This time I'm interviewing Phil Duffy, a senior student of Sifu Wan Kei-Ho from Hong Kong, who carries on a lineage of Northern Shaolin and Boxing Choy. Boxing is a much rarer sub-style of Choy coming from a master called Tam Sam, and it's the same style of Choy that I learned in the UK. So when I met Phil back in the early 2000s, we had a lot to talk about. We've kept in touch over the years, and it was great to catch up again for a chat. Here we get into the differences between all the Choy styles, how it's different training martial arts in Asia compared to the West, and we talk about the key to it all, the ging or jin, that special type of soft power that some people call internal power that the Chinese martial arts are famous for, and how it's used in Choy Fut, particularly the boxing style. We also talk about the famed Wing Chun Choy Fut rivalry in Hong Kong, and how Choy Fut relates to the other styles from the same area, like the older Hung Kyun style. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back and find out how Phil got started in martial arts.
Phil Duffy, nice to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to see you. It's been a long time.
Yeah. When did we meet? You were over in the UK back in
My God.
2000 and oh,
So I was living. I've been in the US for 11 years, and it was while we were still in Hong Kong, and so it's got to be 15 plus years ago.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's just a while
How
ago.
did time march on that quickly?
I know.
So you were in Hong Kong at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in Hong Kong for 16 years, and I've been in the US for 11. So yeah.
Yeah. And so the reason that we bumped into each other was that my student Paul Bowman went to Hong Kong for presumably an academic conference because he was always doing that, going to
Right.
foreign
Yep.
lands for academic reasons. And he was looking for some Choy Fut out there, and
Yeah.
he found your school, not your school, but the school you were at.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
can you
right.
tell
Yeah,
us
he
a little
came over
bit
to
about
say it.
that?
Yeah, so Paul came over to meet Sifu Wan Kei-Ho, who I train under. Sifu Wan teaches both Baksu Lam, Northern Shaolin, and Boxing Choy Fut. And so he came over to train. You guys train the Choy Fut system, but you train the boxing lineage as well, right?
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
boxing lineage. Yes.
Yeah, so and which is you don't get that a lot, right? Everywhere in the world, there's a ton of original Chan lineage. Mostly, what you see is the Hong Sing lineage, which both are fantastic. You don't get a lot of boxing lineage, even in Asia. You don't get a lot of boxing lineage. But it's yeah, Paul came over to train and met with us. We trained. We had a few beers, and then I came down to Bristol to visit you guys when I was in the UK next.
Yeah, and he very kindly taught a class for us. I remember.
Hmm.
And like everything with martial arts, it was the same but different. Like
Right.
every time you meet any other Chinese martial arts style, even if it's the same system, there's all these differences, even though you can recognize the similarities.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting, especially with the older styles. And obviously, I've trained for a while, and yeah, I started off in the Korean styles, and I've trained some of the Japanese stuff. But you see, you can go through some of the more modern styles, and the differences between the schools or the forms of the katas or very slight, right? Everyone tries to stick within a narrow channel. You go to China, and you can train the same style under two different teachers, only they're completely different. There's a lot of change happened over the period of time that the style's been around, 200, 300 years. And so, yeah, you do get a lot more variety. It's interesting because, in my experience in the West, people pick on styles and they say, well, this isn't correct, it should be done this way, and that isn't correct, it should be done this way. In Asia, you don't get that, or certainly in China, you don't get that. In China, you've got teachers over there that look at the styles, to see the techniques, and say, well, it's still the same technique, even if it's done differently. And this is how we do it. It's a different emphasis, different energies, different movements. But, they still see the style as authentic. And that's something that's really quite unique. It wasn't something I expected when I got to Asia, when I got to Hong Kong. to see the differences in the styles and them still regarded as traditional. You grow up with the politics of martial arts in the West, which I think really is influenced heavily by the Japanese and Korean styles, which are a little bit more homogenous in the way they're taught. And it's right or wrong. In China and Hong Kong, there's no right or wrong. It's authentic as long as it abides by the principles of the style.
Interesting, yeah. So how did you end up in Hong Kong learning such a I know maybe obscure style of Choy Lei Fut?
It was a long old winding road. I started training in the UK for the same reason most people did, getting bullied at school. I started with a local style Lao Ga Kung Fu, which was Jeremy Yao style. I grew up in Birmingham in the UK, and Lao Ga is the home. Birmingham's the home of Lao Ga. Over time, I moved areas and couldn't go to the same school, so I ended up switching to Taekwondo. Taekwondo was my thing for a while. I trained initially in TGB Taekwondo. I went to university, carried on with WTF Taekwondo, got my black belt. Carried on training there for a long time. Competed a lot, loved it. Was competing on a fairly regular basis throughout the UK, and so had dreams. After university of European Championships, the Olympics, the usual kind of bullshit. And so I finished university, saved up every single penny, was heading out to Asia. There was a school I was going to visit in Busan in the southern part of South Korea. So I wanted to train there, come back, go through trials, British Championships, European Championships, Olympics. And I was 25 at the time. So on my way over to Korea, I stopped to visit a friend of mine that I went to university with in Hong Kong. I'd studied industrial design, manufacturing, engineering, and so at the time when I arrived, mid 90s, China was the world's factory. There was a lot of people that I'd studied with who were living in Hong Kong or China and working over there, building products. And so I arrived. And my friend was like, well, stick around. We've got this background. We can work. There's jobs in Hong Kong and China. And you couldn't talk to me about that. I was unless you're bouncing off the ceiling with spinning kicks, I wasn't interested. Martial arts, competition, the Olympics was kind of my goal. And she eventually convinced me to stick around for a few months, get some money in my pocket before I get a career. And so I did that. I ended up getting an engineering job in Hong Kong fairly early into my stay there. And while I was there, I decided to go look around at different styles, right? So I did visit the Korean styles first. They're in Hong Kong. I visited the Hapkido schools. I trained a little Hapkido back in the UK as well. I visited the Taekwondo schools. There was nothing that I was really looking for. They were very catered towards young kids. And so I started looking at the Chinese styles. And I was a complete arrogant asshole. I didn't know what he was looking at. I must have insulted so many people. Again, I was looking for a very specific thing, and I didn't really understand the Chinese stuff at the time. I'd spent 10 years with the Korean martial arts, and Lao Ga before that wasn't really an authentic Chinese style. So it was more kickboxing. And so I didn't really know what I was looking at when I looked at the Chinese styles. And I went from school to school to school, teacher to teacher, and I saw what I thought was flowery or ineffective, or I don't know. I don't know what I was looking at. And I trained a little bit here and I trained a little bit there, and I just didn't find anything that I thought was practical. Not that Taekwondo and Hapkido are the most practical styles, but at the time, that's kind of that's how I moved. Long story short, I eventually came upon the person that became my teacher, and the difference between him and the other schools I visited was that in the initial conversation, he didn't have a school. We were teaching privately, so he demonstrated some of his style. He demonstrated the Northern Shaolin style. Northern Shaolin, long arm form, very flowery. And my eyes audibly rolled in my head, and I said, "Thank you." I was very polite, but this is exactly what I'd seen in other places, and I wasn't interested. And then he mentioned, he said, well, things with martial arts and Chinese martial arts, you can't really understand it until you experience the ging. And I'd heard this word ging, like this mystical energy that I'd heard about. And I'm like, okay, you got me interested. Tell me more about ging. And then he said, oh, you can't see ging, you can't hear ging, you can't smell ging. And I went, oh, okay, this is another BS conversation, right? Thank you, great to see you. He said, but you can feel ging. I'm like, okay. He said, you want to feel? And I'm like, yes, I want to feel. What is this ging? Because all these flowery techniques are just boring me out of my mind. And then he said, punch me. And nobody had said that. I've been in Asia probably, a while at this time. Nobody had said, give it a go. And so, and I told you, a mid-20s, arrogant, cocky asshole. And so I went for it. I tried to take this guy's head off. And he smashed me so hard. Oh my God. So freaking hard. He came out with, again, at the time I didn't know, but he hit my incoming hand. I threw a jab cross. He hit my incoming jab so hard, dragged his hand down my arm. I thought he was going to drag the skin off my hand. It was the sting, the pain, the energy was insane. Then he hit me in the throat with his other hand, and then came back super slow, almost embarrassingly slow up my arm to hit me in the throat again with the initial hand. And I realized then and then, if he'd wanted to kill me, I would be dead. There was nothing I could do. I mean, he absolutely neutralized what I was doing, and then just smashed me with an energy I'd never ever experienced before in my life. Now, could some of the other teachers I visited in Hong Kong have had that energy? Absolutely. I was just too arrogant to understand what I was looking at. But yeah, he smashed me so hard. And then I wanted to know more. What was that? What did you just do? How did you get that much power? That was nothing like I'd ever experienced. He shut the conversation down. Didn't want to talk more. Okay, bye-bye. Let me go. I think actually he got the Chinese did that medicine out. He massaged my hand down. I was asking him all these questions. And he was massaging my arm, but didn't engage. Just sent me on my merry way. So I was traveling back to where I was living at the time in Hong Kong, just awestruck. My brain had been rattled. I didn't know what was going on. I'd never experienced. I'd been hit a million times, nothing like that. And so I got home and said, I phoned him back up. I said, I want to train. He said, all right, come back tomorrow, 10 p.m. And so I go back and I started training. And we trained privately, just he and I. I went and met him after he finished work at 10 o'clock at night, and we'd go down to the local dockyard in an area called Kennedy Town on Hong Kong Island, and we'd train under moonlight and the lights out there. And sometimes we'd train for a couple of hours. Other times we'd train till 3 or 4 in the morning. Other times we'd train all night long. And at 7 a.m. I'd have to phone in sick for work, and we'd go for breakfast, and we talk for breakfast, and then we get back to bed and get up and train again. And it was interesting because with my Taekwondo background, really screwed up my approach to Chinese martial arts. I thought I was doing what I was doing, so I was mimicking what he was doing. But obviously I was slathering in this Taekwondo kind of approach. So everything was wrong. I mean, there's some early photos of me back then. It was horrific. He recognized that fairly early. And one of the things I find interesting about Chinese martial arts is there's no syllabus. There is, but it's not a set syllabus like the Japanese and Korean styles. You don't progress level 1, to 10 kind of thing. And so he just said, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. After a few months of training, he just quit all of the empty hand stuff I was doing, and we moved straight to the Guan, the Chinese staff. And the reason he did that is I had no frame of reference for the Guan. I had to start from scratch, and it was learning the Guan that reset all of my basics. So I trained the Guan with him for probably a year. Obviously, at this point, I was training, and my trip to Korea had been sidelined. Yeah, I'll get there. But I carried on training and working, and I trained the Guan with him for about a year. And training the Guan reset all my basics. It reset my back position, it reset my stances, And after a year of that, we went back to the empty hand stuff, and I started to actually be able to follow, and get back to the traditional Chinese basics, which was interesting. Yeah, he couldn't. I just couldn't do it when I had that Taekwondo background. I was trying to, do a Taekwondo version of the Chinese stuff. Throughout the training, it was very based on this is a technique, this is the basics, this is what you're doing to develop Ging energy. This is what you're doing as a physical technique. They weren't, sometimes they're combined. But then whenever you're learning a technique, it's always combined with the power, right? You'd have to feel how this technique was being used before you understood how it was being used, right? There was no kind of just show and tell arms and, legs and just watch. And it was like, okay, this is it, smash, and you got blasted. I went around my first Christmas there, combining Western and Chinese kind of cultures. I went over and brought him a Christmas present, and Sifu doesn't celebrate Christmas. It's not a thing for him. So I brought him a Christmas present. And in Chinese culture, if you give a gift, you receive a gift. And he didn't have anything to give me then. He didn't have any, the red pockets, the lacy pockets that you normally give Chinese New Year. There was none of those around. So he was embarrassed. He said, okay, come in. And he closed, he had a photography studio at the time. So we closed the photography studio, we to shut it down so no one could see. And then his Christmas present exchange to me was to teach me a technique. So he had me throw a punch. He came in, brought his one hand around the back of my neck, and the other hand was like a palm heel strike to my forehead. Boom! And he wiped me out. I was gone. He catches me. I'm on the verge of consciousness. My head's spinning. I don't know what I'm doing. And he sits me down. He starts accessing the Yutwai points, the acupressure points, brings me back around. And he's like, "You like?" And that was it, right? I mean, like, he knocked me out, and that was a present, because once I understood that energy, then I could replicate the technique. And it's interesting because over in the West and wherever I've trained in the past, it's like a technique is a visual thing. You look at a punch, you follow that punch, you mimic that punch. In Asia, the punch is more about how you transfer the energy, or certainly I say in Asia, in Hong Kong, in China, it's how you transfer the energy. And so once you've had that energy transferred, you can gain the technique. And so I find it really interesting because a lot of the teachers will try to avoid laying hands on, because if they lay hands on you, then you understand that technique and you can learn that technique. And so it's a really interesting approach. So we trained together for a number of years privately. I had a friend of mine join Roy that's met Mark Paul as well. Then eventually we opened up a full-time school with my teacher, and that's still going today. And that's down in Xiangguan area of Hong Kong.
Oh, nice. So when you say Ging, is that the Cantonese pronunciation of what a lot of people call Jin?
Yeah, exactly.
Or mispronounced as Jin.
Yeah, it's Cantonese version of Jin. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously, sorry.
I was going to say, how would you describe what Ging is?
It's interesting because people get mixed up between Hei or Qi and like Ki, and they talk about this inner power, right? Like, and in the Japanese styles, they call it Ki. The Ging, the energy is, and there's different types of Ging. There's not like, we have Ting Ging, which is a listening Ging, when you're creating a bridge. There is the fucking, which is the when you're striking somebody. There's different types of Ging. I think the Japanese have something called kime or kaimi. I don't know how it's actually pronounced, but it's that like kind of double movement, and it's the energy on the end of a punch. The Chinese we use the phrase ging, and it's not necessarily related to punching, related to different techniques, but it is the energy you're producing that goes from the technique. And different styles have different versions of that. In the style I was training, which was mostly the boxing Choy, and boxing is very heavily influenced from Northern Shaolin. Goes back into to history where two teachers shared students. But the ging is a soft ging. So it's very, very, very soft. And the idea is to create as much power and energy in a strike as possible, but without using a lot of muscular, heavy strength. You train Hongao, Hongqiu, and the ging is very different. It's a very heavy, rooted ging that strikes more like your kind of traditional heavy punch you see in the Okinawan styles. And the ging is completely different. And so when you look at the ging, the common way to break this down is with the mhang, the five elements, water, air, fire, wood, and did I say water, air, fire, wood,
Metal,
and metal? Yeah. And so each one of those have different components, and so it really is the transfer of soft energy. Now, if we want to scrapple that and try to get away from the kind of Chinese cosmology, Chinese physics, you can just look at it as from a kinematic sense, it's the transfer of energy through the most direct method, right? So if you've got a ripple effect, a wave going from wherever the energy's initiated from, the feet through the body as loose as possible to be able to get as much energy out at the end, but maximizing the recoil, right? So you've got none of that energy's bouncing back into you. I think a lot of what people train in martial arts is the end space, right? The classic kind of photograph of when you see a person in a full stance with a punch coming out or whatever it is. By then, the energy is missing. In the Chinese styles, the energy occurs during the transfer. It's during the movement. So if you've got it's rather than going from stance to stance, that stepping between the stances is where the energy occurs, and that's the point where you hit. And so imagine, you're cracking the whip. At one end, you're lifting your hand, you're like slapping that hand down to create that energy wave. Then the energy wave transfers through the whip. You see that the sine wave go through, and at the end you hear the snap. That's ging, except it's traveling through your body. I spent a lot of time. Don't get me wrong. The conversations that we had with my teacher were obviously all around the Chinese kind of approach to physics, which is based around like He or Qi, and the development of ging energy. But having an engineering background, I spent a lot of time trying to understand the kinematics and where that comes in and how the body's like moving or creating energy, how it's storing energy, how it's issuing energy. Some of the stuff I could work out, I could do the math on. Other things I couldn't. I couldn't work out how the body stores and compacts energy, which going through various types of Heigong or Qigong, it's very obvious that it does. You can see it, but I couldn't work out the physiology behind that. But other things like striking, there is a definite way you could express that with Western physics or Western kinematics. I don't know if that was got a bit weird.
Well, there was a lot to unpack there. I don't think I'm going to. It's the sort of thing that's very hard to do on a podcast because I can't feel anything. Like if we were here talking, you could just go, no, it's like this, bop, and I go, oh, okay, so it's like that, and it's not like that. It's somewhere between those two, and that would be the sort of conversation we'd have, and it'd be a lot easier because I could feel what you were doing.
That's the problem with this stuff, right? I mean, it's hard to express verbally. It's hard to write it down. And, there's a million books out there that talk about this, and none of them really accurately describe it, which is why, the old systems transfer, teacher to student to teacher to student, yeah.
Yeah, so it seems to me that what you're talking about is the way of training it is a lot more to do with just doing it and getting the feel right than thinking about the complicated explanation of how it works.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the big differences between training in Asia and training, in the West. Westerners have this, include myself, Westerners have this need to understand the logic and the building blocks behind everything. You show them a technique, they go, okay, I've got it. then they've got a lot of questions. Well, how do you do this, and how does this work, and how do you use this, and how? And in Asia, you don't do that. In Asia, you follow the teacher. You don't ask questions. You repeat, you repeat, you repeat, you repeat, you repeat, you repeat. And when you think you've got it, you repeat some more. And then you go, okay, I've got this down. And then the teacher says, no, you don't. Repeat some more. And you just work it, right? And it kind of looks very dogmatic, but going through that and going through that mental exercise of breaking that down yourself and asking that question, is this correct? Have I got the power? Is this correct? Am I learning this correctly? And the teacher keeping an eye on you, so making sure you don't go down the wrong pathway. But it is a system of self-discovery that way. And I don't think we tend to do that as much in the West. We look to understand something intellectually and conceptually before we can physically understand it. Asia is the opposite way around. Now, I know a bunch of people that train in Asia that apply that method, but they also don't ask the questions mentally themselves, and so it is just a repeat, and they never get the freedom of the technique, right? They're never able to use it properly because they don't go through that questioning. The good martial artists I've met, are able to actually work with a teacher, just work and repeat and repeat and repeat and get that energy into the body and work it out, but also ask those questions. And how do I use it if I'm in this position? How do I use it if I'm in that position? Like, have I got my energy correctly? What if I adjust my stance here? What if I, change this kind of aspect of it? I'm getting more power, and that's the approach. I think the other thing that's important to mention is that class training and private training are essential for all good martial artists in everywhere. A lot of people don't do that. They train when they get to class, and they might go to class a lot. They might go 3 days a week or 5 days a week, but they train when they get to class. And when you're training in class, you're doing something, your teacher's coming correcting you, but it's very hard to ask those questions of yourself. Whereas I train, and I know my teacher does this as well. When he's training under his teacher, my Lao Sigong, he's training and he's following exactly what the teacher's saying, and he's doing it. But then he's also training by himself afterwards and asking those questions. Am I doing this correct? Is the energy here? Can I feel this? What does it feel like if I move it to this space? What if I just change the angle slightly to here? Do I still have it? And so I think those two elements are essential to training martial arts. I know I did that a lot. I trained in my teacher, but then I'd also put in private sessions. And myself and Roy, one of my classmates, we'd go down to the Goon on a Sunday when we knew that there was no one there, and literally beat the shit out of each other. I mean, trying different versions of the same technique. What if I land it like this? And what if I use this first one? Can I get it to it from this position? I remember we were training Bonkyun that you use in Singyi at one point, and we just spent a couple of hours, knocking 7 shades of whatever out of each other, trying to get that technique down. And that's how you learn, right? You can do it by yourself. Yeah. It's fantastic if you got a partner. You've got to have class training. You've got to be taught the correct method, and then you have to go and work it by yourself. In my opinion.
Yeah, that's how my Shingi teacher taught me Feng Chuan, as he pronounced it. It was basically all about being hit with it. The whole thing was about being hit with it. The actual physical move, there isn't that much to it. It's kind of like there's a stance which you should know already. There's a step which you should know already, and then there's just extend your arm. But the important thing was the way it hit you, where it hit you. Well, it could hit anywhere, but as it penetrated, was it going in? Was it stopping on the surface? Was it going halfway in? Was it going all? And it was all those little things that mattered more than what it looked like.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? It's about minimizing the recoil. It's about ensuring that the energy is going out and not coming back into you. And I think, obviously a really easy way to test that is bag training, right? Like often when you see people doing the form, they've got a great technique and they can bang it out in class in thin air. They can hit pads with it and it still looks good. But against a really heavy bag, you see people either bounce off, or the technique kind of glances off
crumples,
it. Structure crumples, yeah, exactly. And so that's I think the real ability to do this, combine the right movement with the right technique, the right kinematic kind of movement within the body to create that ging, and then as you hit, minimize the recoil back into you. And that's where I think you get the penetrating power. But it's not easy to get to that point.
No. Boxing particularly is famous for, well, it's called leopard fist in English, but I'm not always convinced that that's actually the Chinese translation. Do you want to talk about leopard fist, because it's quite a big part of boxing 25?
It is. I mean, so obviously, Choy as a system is based on the 5 animals. Tiger, leopard, crane, snake, and dragon. And the founder of the boxing version, like I said before, there's 3 kind of lineages of Choy. The Chang from Sinway village. There's the Hongsing version from Foshan. And then the boxing version from the northern part of Guangzhou. Tam Sam was the founder of the boxing. Not that any of these masters found the style, but they start teaching, and the style diverges from the original so much it becomes a lineage, right? But Cholifat as a style, the Hongsing, the traditional, original styles have many forms. Tam Tam was much more interested in fighting, and so he reduced a lot of the forms down to a much smaller subset of forms. And what he taught instead was a lot of drills. When he was teaching, it was all how to use the technique. There's a lot of footwork drills, there's a lot of hand drills, and so we have a lot more drills in the boxing lineage than we do in the others, but a lot less forms. One of the things he trained a lot was what we call chap Choy, which is the leopard fist. Pao Kyun is the Cantonese for leopard fist. Chap Choy is like a penetrating fist system that uses the leopard fist in the end. So the shape is the leopard fist, but there's lots of other elements to the technique. And we train different versions of it. There's 4 different shapes. There's the flat Feng chap, which is with the back of the hand. I'm trying to describe it. I'm performing this. So with the back of the hand up and the hand flat in a horizontal position. Reverse that, and the palm of the hand is up, but it's still in that horizontal position. Then there's the vertical chaps, where the chap is the arm is vertical, the hand is vertical, and the palm is facing in towards you. Or there's the version where the elbow rolls over, negative chap, and the hand is vertical, but the back of the hand is facing in. Those are the 4 basics, and then we utilize them in a whole different array of movements, combined with how the arm swings and how the hand's hidden, and the different footwork, right? There's a system called Linwan Chap Choy in Cantonese, which is continuous chap, where we're firing different techniques either from the same hand or from the reverse hand. And the thing with the chap in the boxing system is it's a hidden technique. So we don't want someone to see it coming. So when we fire it, it's often fired underneath an existing technique that's out there. So if I've got my arm out, I've thrown a punch, or I've thrown whatever, then the way the chap comes is it sneaks its way to the opponent by coming up under the armpits of the when you're throwing it, and it snakes along below the other arm to strike out. So we try to hide it as much as possible. There's also versions where we come from behind and the hand's behind us so you can't see it, and then it snakes through and it becomes visible at the last second. It's combined with the footwork, the bit bar footwork, and so the hand by itself has no power at all. In fact, we don't even train power for the hand itself. All of the power for the chap is trained in the footwork training, and so there's various different footworks where we take a step and then we slide the back leg in, and so there's momentum with the whole step. We create this body momentum. And we train that as large and as wide as possible to build the power up. But in actual usage, it can be just a fleeting, like the tiniest movement. So you don't even have to take a step. But we train that power with this bit more training, and that's what generates the power to the hand. I will say, what I've described with the chap, the panther fist, the leopard fist. If you haven't trained those hands, it is not going to work. You're going to break your wrist. So a big part of training in the boxing style is conditioning. We do a lot of press ups on the chap, on the hand and on the chap. And really what you're trying to do, you're not trying to strengthen the end of the fingers, although we do the conditioning on that. You're trying to strengthen the wrist, because that's the first thing that's going to, give way. There are two thumb positions for the chap Choy. One is the thumb along the side of the hand on the outside. One is the thumb pulled across the palm below the curled fingers. Both of those give a rigidity to the wrist. I'm not sure which one I prefer. I tend to use both for different things, and I train the press ups on both. But training those press ups so that the wrist is strong enough is absolutely essential, because you can't use the chap without. What I do like about it is, because all of the energy is concentrated on the is that the second knuckle? I guess that's the second knuckle, rather than the big knuckles of the fist. You're hitting with a much smaller area, so you're penetrating a lot more. You wouldn't want to use this in replacement of a jab. It's not that kind of attack, but you certainly use it with the bit more movement, the body movement, and the footwork. You can penetrate really deeply with this. We tend to use it to strike the ribs, the solar plexus, the throat, any of those kind of exposed areas. You're not hitting someone in the in the chest of the body with this, or you're using it in vulnerable areas. So point to the chin, point to the jaw, eyes, throat's a big one for this one. Solar plexus, those kind of areas, and it has a fantastic ability to penetrate. Now, one of the tenets of certainly boxing Charlie Fuddy is, once a hand goes out, it doesn't come back empty-handed. So we might strike with say I hit with the right hand. Once it's hit, rather than pull that back for the left hand to take over, once it's hit, we'll pull that through and transfer it into like a ding choy, or a needle punch. So we'll drag it up the body and hit the bottom of the chin with the knuckles, with a strike up before the other hand comes out. So once it's hit, it's still live. Again, this is part of building the ging up. So once you've hit, you've created you've hit with the power, but there's enough ging in the body so that you can still cause damage and still strike without having to rechamber the punch. And that's a big thing about like building the soft energy up, is you don't need to chamber the punch 1, 2, 1, 2. You don't need a full body movement to create that power. And so the chap's a really useful technique. We don't generally use it as entering. I know I've seen a lot of people on YouTube and stuff using the chap almost like a boxing punch. That's not how it's taught in Asia. It's not. We don't tend to use it as as an entering technique. It's once something's been established and we're looking to move and capitalize on that, then we would use the chap. It's quite funny. I see a lot of Westerners train Chinese martial arts, and we all know the jab punch combination. We get these days in boxing, MMA, kickboxing, whatever it is. Very powerful technique, and so, but it has that connotation that it's Western boxing. It's different, and we should use a Chinese technique instead of that. But in Hong Kong, China, they use the jab cross. So they'll jab like a Western boxer, and as soon as a bridge is made, as soon as they've got the cue, the young cue is there, they will transfer into Chinese hands. And so my teacher will use that all the time. He'll use like a Western boxing jab. Not that he's looking to strike with it. It's merely to create that bridge, right? Once the bridge is there, then the hands transfer into something else.
That's really interesting. I mean, boxing's been in Asia for like, you know, Western boxing has been in Asia for hundreds of years already. So there's no, you know,
Absolutely.
why isn't it part of the systems?
Yeah, I mean, all of the guys I know use it, and then that's whether it's Chalifat or Chetson Tonglong or whatever the style that's been trained out there. All the teachers use a version of the jab, but again, they're not looking to. It's not used the way you use a jab It's used as an opening technique to create a bridge, and once
Yeah,
that
yeah.
bridge is there, they move into the Chinese techniques.
Interesting. And talking about other styles, is this Wing Chun Choy Fat's rivalry in Hong Kong really all it's cracked up to be? And this is a question from Paul Bowman, who told me to ask you this.
Dude, it is the funniest. Yeah, it's totally there, and it's there on a level of Celtic versus Rangers. I mean, it is there.
Yeah.
It's the funniest thing. So back in the day, there's an area in China, Foshan. It's a town within the Guangdong province, and that town was famous for three styles, right? It was famous for Hongkyun or Honggar. It's where Wang Fei-hong lived, right? And there's a fantastic Wang Fei-hong museum there. If you're ever in southern China, Fatan, or in Cantonese, the area is called Fatan in Mandarin, Foshan. Definitely worth visiting. So the Wang Fei-hong Museum's there. Also, it's where the Hongsing Gun is there, and for Cholifat. So the Hongsing Gun, the original Gun, the original school is there. It's celebrated 170 years this year. It's a beautiful building, and like kind of the mecca of Cholifat. It's also where Ip Man was based originally, and there is an Ip Man museum there. Now they lived at different time periods, but so Foshan really is the heart of modern Ip Man style Wing Chun, modern Wang Fei Hong style Hong Ga, and the modern Hong Sing style Cholifat. And because of that connection, there's these rivalries between the schools. Now, Hongar is the granddaddy of the Southern styles, and so they take this position where they're wearing the white hats. They're the white, the cowboys, and they're the granddaddy of the thing. So and then the two kind of troublesome children are Wing Chun and Choy Li Fut. But it's absolutely hilarious. That rivalry in Hong Kong between Choy Li Fut and Wing Chun is completely there. That you should hear the bad mouthing between the different teachers, and it's all done in jest, right? They all know that Wing Chun. All the Choy Li Fut guys know Wing Chun's legit. All of the Wing Chun guys know that Choy Li Fut's legit. But there is this absolute Celtic versus Rangers style of rivalry between the two, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious.
Does it ever break out into fights? No.
Hong Kong, when I arrived in 1990, and back in the day, it was a city where there was the fights would occur. These days, it's one of the safest cities in the world. It's well policed. Culturally, there is a lot of respect there. It's a collective society, not an individual society. You don't get a lot of fights, and when you do, they tend to be triad versus triad, kickoffs.
Right.
There's very few. The martial art tournaments, the martial art events we go to, are very placid. If you go to a Sandar fight and there's Wing Chun fighting or Choy Li Fut Wing Chun, I mean the crowd is going bananas, but there's no difference between the fighters. We do a lot of these big Chinese Association dinners that happen several times a year, and you'll turn up and there could be 300, 400 people at these dinners, each sitting at a table of 12. And during the dinner, people come up and do demonstrations, weapons, qigong, empty hand forms, and occasionally you'll get like a multi-style dinner, and you'll get Wing Chun and Choy Li Fut, and there'll be barbs kind of past, but no one does anything. All that stuff's gone. You got to go back to the 60s for that, I think. But it is hilarious.
It sounds more like it's like one big family that's arguing amongst themselves rather than like separate elements.
None of it's real. It's all good-natured joshing, but it's really, really funny. But yeah, no one's, and then everyone will talk about the different style and their style, and like, and occasionally you get the Gua Choy was designed to take out the Tan Sao hand of the Wing Chun, but none of the teachers believe that as a real thing. If you look at the timelines when they were developed, historically none of this supports those arguments. It's more
historically, Choy was way earlier than Wing Chun.
Way earlier, exactly.
Like 60 odd years, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's Choy became a very big style. It was one of the most prolific styles in southern China, and because it was associated with the Hongmun, the group that was pushing against the Qing government. Wing Chun came much later and was very, very, very small in southern China, and got slightly bigger when man moved to Hong Kong. But again, like the growth of Wing Chun happened after the Bruce Lee phenomenon. So it wasn't really a big rivalry back in the day, and these days it's more of a it's more of a joshing kind of joking thing, but it's absolutely there.
It can't hurt the marketing of either style to have a bit of like it's a bit like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, like
absolutely,
it's helped both of them.
Yeah, totally. It's hilarious. I've got to say, when you're in dinners and you meet these guys, the Wing Chun guys like saying this and the Choy guys saying that, it's really funny to observe.
Is there, having trained in like traditional Chinese martial arts in Hong Kong, how embedded would you say the religious aspects of the practice are?
Oh, that's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. So, first thing I'll say is Chinese martial arts are part of Chinese culture. A really in-depth, long-lived part of Chinese culture. And so people in Hong Kong, whether they train martial arts or not, know about Chinese martial arts. It's on TV all the time. It's in the books. It's part of the, Southern Chinese kind of culture. And so alongside that, religion is part of Hong Kong culture. Hong Kong is one of the most modern cities on the planet. It still has an underlying kind of connection to Taoism, Buddhism as the two majors. You may grow up as a Christian, but often when there's a death in the family, the funeral will be a Taoist funeral. Taoism and Buddhism are, those religions that are, it's about the individual, and you can be a Taoist and go to a Buddhist temple. You can be a Buddhist and go to a Taoist temple, and it's more about you paying homage. You don't go to a service. You go to a temple, you light the incense, you make an offering, you make a prayer, and you move on. And so it's really not about sitting down and having that service. So you can have your approach and not be a defined Buddhist, but still believe in the Buddhist elements in the culture, or not be a defined Taoist and still take part in the Taoist elements in the Chinese culture. Chinese martial arts associated with them. My teacher actually is a devout Buddhist. He is heavily involved in the Buddhism that comes from Tibet, and so he actually is a devout Buddhist. But again, when we first set up the school, we would go to the Taoist temples and make offerings. Feng Shui is tied in there as well, and it's really hard to separate these out in the different elements. So religion and I would say cultural connection to the wider Chinese cosmology are a big part of martial arts in Hong Kong. All of the teachers are associated with that, without them necessarily being a devout Buddhist or a devout Taoist. Often I'd go training and a session, we wouldn't do any martial arts. It'd be about understanding Feng Shui but not understanding kind of Feng Shui from the, I need a plant in front of this window. The sun needs, it's the approach to Feng Shui in Hong Kong is much more based on cosmology and numerology. And so there's a very complex kind of compass they use to determine kind of energy levels and where things are coming from. And the Western version of Feng Shui is it doesn't really reflect what you see in Asia. And that's tied to understanding the concept of the way the universe works from the Chinese kind of spiritual perspective. The Mo Gik becomes Tai Gik, emptiness becomes Tai Gik or Tai Chi, which becomes goes through and becomes the I Ching. And those elements are tied to the belief in He or Qi, and then how Qi works in the body. So again, you've got this understanding that's tied to Taoism, that's then associated with the way that Qi works, which is then tied to the way that Chinese medicine works, which is then tied to the way energy moves in the body, which is then tied to martial arts. So all of these things are tied together in a complicated bundle. And I turn up, and some sessions would be, preparing the dajia or the herbal liniment for, fixing, bruises or breaks. Or, I'd have a student to be there with a broken limb, and we'd have to build out the dafan, the poultice, and help Sifu kind of, repair that wound. Other days I'd turn up and we'd go to the temple, and Sifu would be explaining the different Taoist gods and their background. Other days we'd turn up and it'd be lion dancing. And so there is no kind of Friday night's martial art night and kicking and punching in Asia. It's more about learning this deeper aspect of Chinese culture, and you can't separate religion or any of the traditional cultural elements from martial arts. They're all smushed in together.
Wow, which makes it difficult to teach other people, especially in the West, doesn't it?
Yeah, I really struggled when I first moved to the US, going back into a Western style. And what I missed, and I gave up. I've stopped training for a long time. What I really missed wasn't the physical elements of martial arts; it was the cultural connection, and it wasn't there for me. And so that was really hard. Going back to a place where martial arts is kicking and punching, but without an understanding of any of the greater kind of information. That was.
I was going to say one thing whenever we've touched base over the years, you've always been telling me, "Oh well, I've met this guy and he's really interesting. He's got this style, and I've met this guy and he's got this style, and we swap a few techniques." So you've always kind of kept your hand in at learning little new things here and there, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, you got to empty the cup, right? I mean, that's the thing with Sifu. So he's got two main teachers. Lao Yip and Jugachong. One of them comes from the Northern Shaolin background. Everyone who's trained Northern Shaolin in Southern China and Hong Kong, Baxiuan, has a connection to Choy because the original teacher, Gu Zheng, his best friend was Tam Sam, who was the founder of the Baxiang Choy lineage, and they switched senior students. So if you study Baxiang today, you will get a little bit of the Baxiang Choy lineage. If you study Baxiang Choy, you'll get a little bit of the Northern Shaolin lineage. And he has one teacher from the Jukajong from Baxiang, another teacher from Lao Yip from the Baxiang Choy lineage. And so those are his two teachers, but then he's always meeting other folks and saying, well, what about this? And how do you learn this? And so he always encourages learning. And I've seen him, this guy's been training for decades. The guy's just an unbelievable martial artist. And I've seen him be completely humble, talking to, one of the seniors of another style. And, the conversation will get past kind of the initial kind of introduction and this, that, and the other, and it'll get to, well, what about this element? And Sifu's trying to tease out, what does this guy know? How can I learn it? And he's insanely humble when he does that. And I'm the same, right? It's always good to keep training. It's always good to understand more. And so whether I walk into another class or another place, it's you do it, with a white belt mentality, and you empty that cup. Roy, and I, again, my training partner in Hong Kong for many years, we used to take a boys' weekend every year, and we'd go to another part of Asia. So we'd fly out to Taiwan, and we'd go, and we'd have quite a few beers, I must say. but we'd also go and visit a bunch of schools, right? And
Yeah.
we'd get up at 4 a.m. and go to the parks at 5 a.m. and have conversations with Bakwa teachers and Singi and Taikik. We'd go to Malaysia, Singapore. We went to Korea. And for us, it was going on this homage of visiting other schools, challenging, we don't even have to learn. It's just, can we embed ourselves in the culture of this country, meet a couple of phenomenal people, hope, maybe learn a few things, but if not, just be involved in the culture of the martial arts in that city or country. We loved it. And I've tried to continue that kind of approach.
Yeah. So what are you up to at the moment then?
So I'm back training. I just got sick of being old and not being involved. So I'm back training. One of the good things about the COVID lockdown was, it gave me the time to build out a little gym at home. So I've got a gym here. I'm back to being getting fit again. I've got we've got a Qingjong or a Mayanzhong, a wooden dummy, but the Choy foot with a movable arm set up. I've got my
brilliant.
legs. Yeah, I've got all set up. So
I've never seen one of those, a real one of those, but I've seen pictures of them. But they look great because you can, if for the South Shore, you can sort of go, bop, can't you?
Exactly, yeah. It's great, yeah. I mean, I'm using it fairly regularly. I use it for different techniques. So, obviously, one of the things you can do a lot more, with those kind of things is practice the samsing or the conditioning techniques, right? So I'm conditioning my arms there, using the daja to prepare, conditioning my arms. But then you can also use it to work footwork, and your different techniques. So I'm using that fairly regularly. I've got my wall bag set up. I've got a number of other things. My style in Hong Kong, we did a lot of conditioning. So I've got a fairly wide piece of bamboo, or a thick piece of bamboo that is hollowed out, and I filled it full of rocks. I've sealed the ends. I use that for rolling the arms. I've got my Ditsajung sandbags. Again, I've got one with beans, one with small rocks, and then I've got one with the lead shot. So I'm training that again. So I'm going through and I'm training my systems from Hong Kong. I've got to say, at this age, I'm 52 now. Doing the Northern Shaolin is hard on me. My hips just, they don't move the way they used to. I think I've got years of injury. And so the really low stance stuff, the pok toys, this spinning sweeps, the kind of more extreme stance, I struggle with these days. So I'm really focusing more on the Choy foot. I can get through Choy foot, no problem. So I'm training the Choy foot. I've got there's a group of folks I met in San Diego where I live, that train Hongga. And the teacher there, like me, many years of background in martial arts. He has been a Chinese traditional medicine doctor for the last 20 odd years. He works he does Jiangao, acupuncture, acupressure, Toina, etc. So, he's got an in-depth kind of academic understanding of this stuff. He started like me, originally in Taekwondo, Kyokushin, went to Japan, trained Shunji Kembo, before he was exposed to Chinese martial arts. And for the last, 20 plus years, he's been training in Hongkyu. And so he's got this background where he really understands what he's doing. He teaches a very traditional version of Hongkyu, which works for me. He teaches in a traditional kind of Chinese format, and again, a lot of work on the conditioning, game training, and so there is that kind of connection with the Chinese culture, which you don't get in other schools. It's a very small school, 6 people training there. They're all around my age. We've all been training for decades. It's just a bunch of old folks that still put the effort in, still work hard, but like there's just zero ego. So I go down there and I exchange. I teach a little bit my boxing Choy foot. I learn a little bit of the Hongkyu, and like it's a really good exchange. So that's kind of what I'm working on now is, my traditional stuff from Wan Sifu, learning a little bit of the the foundational form, of the Hongqian style Gongji Fuqin, which is incredible. You know, Hongqian and Cholifat, they come from the same place. So a lot of the techniques are almost identical. The Ging, the energy is completely different. You know, Cholifat's a long arm style. We use it short, but we train long. But it's all about striking and developing that Ging on the strikes. Hongqian is essentially a grappling style. It's a standing grappling style. You're a lot closer, and so there's a lot more body manipulation. The two, I think, complement each other incredibly well.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with your background, obviously you do a lot of the grappling, but you know, having the background in Tai Chi and the kind of standing grappling they have in Tai Chi, and then the Cholifat, I think you'd be, with a good teacher, you'd be really interested in Hongqian. I always thought it was because it looks, when you see the forms, it looks like a striking style, but they've got different. But all of the hands-on techniques, none of it's, I mean, there is striking, obviously, but a lot of it is grappling. And I had no
arm manipulation rather than, so that
arm and body manipulation.
You think they're strikes, but really they're just sort of like
exactly right.
In jiu-jitsu, you'd call it an arm drag. You know, that's right. Kind of like
arm drag. That's standing. Exactly
standing arm manipulations.
Yeah, all those things when you're coming up onto the tricep and you're pulling. You know, it's funny because you see the form. There's a lot of tiger in the Hongqian.
Yeah,
and the hands could be anything. You could have mittens on it. It's not about that. It's about the forearm, where the forearm's positioned, and the body movement, because it's all about it's all body work. It's all about how you're leading someone and manipulating their position. It's almost like the prelude to judo before a throw, when you're moving someone and getting them off balance, and then you've got the throw. In Hongqian, it's the same. It's that prelude to the movements, body control, and then you've got a trip or a strike. You're either getting them off balance, moving in position where you can strike and cause an effect, or you're getting them in a position where you're tripping them and then can follow up. But there's no groundwork, but it is an incredible amount of standing grappling. And for me, I've never done that, so I find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's great that you've managed to find something so traditional and authentic, like so close to you.
Yeah, no, it's an hour's drive, but it's
a long way,
yeah. I mean, when there's traffic, it's not too bad. But yeah, it's a good place. The place I train at is the Chinese Taoist Association, downtown Hong Kong. It's the guy who forms that originally. He is a Chen Tai Chi teacher, so he lives in that like Tai Chi Bagua Singyi world. He's also a professor at the local kind of traditional Chinese medicine school. And the place is set up. It looks like an authentic ruin. It's the closest you're going to get to Asia, in somewhere like California, where it's, certainly San Diego. If you're in the areas with larger Chinese populations, you're in LA or, San Francisco, you may see more traditional stuff. But it's a lot of what you see in Asia is, Cobra Kai. Or, so over here, there's, sorry, do I say in Asia? A lot of what you see in California or in the US
in California,
McDojo stuff, right? So there's a lot of McDojo karate places. There's a lot of McDojo kung fu places. There's a lot of MMA. Southern California's got a fairly rich tradition in MMA, but again, it's taught in that very westernized kind of approach. Yeah, there's not a lot of traditional Chinese stuff. You don't see that here.
No, did you say it was San Diego?
San Diego, yeah.
Yeah, that is the mecca of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in America as well.
Yeah, huge.
That's where all the famous people are.
Yep.
Yeah.
So those schools are legit, right? They're very legit, and then they're great. But then you've either got that, like really legit BJJ MMA stuff. But again, it's a very Western approach to martial arts. Or you've got McDojos, right? You don't have. I haven't even seen a lot of good karate here or good traditional Japanese stuff. It's. I'm sure it's here, and it's just I haven't experienced it.
Wow.
There's one really authentic wushu school that I know, but again, wushu's not my kind of style, but it is absolutely authentic. I'm sure there's decent Wing Chun here. There's decent Wing Chun everywhere, but
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we've been going for about an hour, so we should probably wrap things up.
cool.
I just to let you know, I'm still practicing that Choy foot drill that you taught me when you were here.
No way.
So
That's crazy.
It has survived. Yeah.
That's so funny. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's strange how little seeds are dropped somewhere and they
Absolutely.
carry on. It's amazing. Yeah. So anyway, great to hear that you're still training and enjoying the Chinese culture and the martial arts.
Yeah, thanks. I try to keep it alive, right? I should be teaching more. I work crazy hours, but it's funny. In my life, when good things have happened to me, it's all been around martial arts. I've met people outside of martial arts, through martial arts that I've got new jobs from. I've got good things have happened. Whenever there's been elements where things aren't being successful in my life, it's because I've stopped training, or it's not because, but it's alongside me stopping training. And so martial arts have just been this thing that's always been good to me, and I'm trying to keep it going.
Cool. Well, thank you for being on the podcast and sharing your knowledge with all our listeners. That's been
Hey, you're welcome.
really great.
Thanks, good chatting with you again.
All right, have a great day. Bye-bye. And you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. You can find out more about the Tai Chi Notebook podcast at www.thetaichinotebook.com. You can support us by giving our podcast a positive review on iTunes and our page a like on Facebook. Just search for the Tai Chi Notebook to find us. Until next time, enjoy your training.